So as you know, I've been wanting to try to make a knife since we've been watching Forged in Fire. I've been playing around with a couple of different things, and I decided to come back to using this old saw blade, actually the one that we had used to make the very first knife, Austin, years ago. So I got out my case knife just to get a little sense of the profile of the blade, drew that onto the saw blade, and then started to cut with the Dremel. And here you can see the blank cut out, very rough around the edges, and getting ready for the next stage of a little bit more processing and figuring out how to put it all together. Here's a closer look at the blank. Again, you can see lots of gouges and rough spots around the edges, but you see the basic profile, and we'll get that cleaned up and made into a real blade here. The next step was just to drill the pivot hole, literally just using a small nail as the bar to pivot around, but just drilled that through. So here comes the first test. I needed to test to see how it would pivot around the pivot pin and then come to a stop against the little backstop pin, both of these made out of just small nails. So I set this up on a piece of scrap wood and gave it a try. And this is the problem. The blade was going to hit that stop pin and would not be able to close fully. So that was obviously a problem. Had to figure out what to do about that. And the solution was pretty simple. Just needed to cut a little groove for the stop pin to slide into, and just simply marked where the pin would hit the blade, then took it back to the Dremel and cut a little slot. Then it was time for another test, so back to our block of wood to see how this would work. And it worked just fine. The blade would slide right around the stop bar or stop pin and be able to close fully. I did a lot of work with the Dremel, both for cutting and for sanding and shaping. This is going to be a little bit of video of me sanding the blade, getting some of the shape better. Ended up doing several different sands, some with just regular sandpaper and just by hand, and then some of it, of course, by the Dremel. Now, this was just the result after the Dremel sanding. You'll see later on, I think it looks a little bit better after some additional sanding. One of the things that I would do on the next knife is actually get some buffing compound and a buffing wheel on the Dremel and really work on polishing this to a nicer finish. And here we have just another test to make sure everything is fitting fine. We've got it set up with the pivot pin, and we're going to see that it makes a smooth closing around the stop pin. You can see for the scrap piece of wood, this is literally a paint stirring stick. So, as we always say, scrap, it always works. And sure enough, the blade will close just fine around the stop pin. And one of the things I realized is that the kind of the backside, depending on how you're thinking about it, the spine of the knife would be open. There would be an open space between the two sides, the two scales. So I had to draw a little insert, and this is literally a shim. So again, using scrap wood, but to make a little insert to go between the two scales and to give the back spine a solid look. So here we are, just roughing it up. We've got a couple pieces from the shim. We've got the pivot pin driven through and the stop pin. Then the heads of those little nails simply cut off and driven down below the surface of the wood. Here's another look at that stage. You can see the spine and the little insert that's in there to give that a complete look. It's amazing what some sanding can do, right? So using the Dremel, shaped the handles, both sides, and started to smooth things out. Here it is from the underside. You see the groove there where the blade will fold into. And here's what it looks like folded before the staining and the finishing with the polyurethane, a couple of coats of polyurethane with a little sanding in between. And here's the final product. We got it stained and got some polyurethane on it. Again, this is made literally just from one piece of scrap wood. Really, it's just a wooden shim to make the scales there. And here we can see, we can just open it up. And there's our blade. Now, I will say one of the things is it's not as sharp as I would like it to be. We'll do a little test cut here. And you'll see that it's not as sharp as we'd like it to be, but it does, it cuts. But for a first try to make a folding knife, maybe not too bad.